Okay, so welcome back to the Real Tea Interviews. Just as a precursor to the interview for those of you who didn't see the first episode on my website, I'm interviewing small businesses to hear about how COVID-19 has affected them and what plans they have for the future. So the goal of this project is to connect members of the community with local businesses through my subscription box, and then I'm providing a combination of coffee, tea, and snack products for the small businesses you're helping during this difficult time. Today I'm excited to be welcoming you, Amy. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. And firstly, introduce us to you and your business a little bit. What is the product? And explain a little bit about how you and your partners came up with the idea.
Sure. So I'm Amy Zeidelman. I'm co-founder and the youngest of the three sisters who are my co-founders as well that started Soom Foods. We sell tahini and tahini products in the American market. For those of you, which it could be many, that are not familiar with tahini, tahini is an ingredient that's popular in Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, North African, a variety of cultural cuisines. It's made from 100% roasted and pressed sesame seeds. And it's an ingredient that we really came to have an affinity for because my middle sister, Jackie, lives in Israel. Her husband, Omri, has been in the tahini industry at this point for over 15 years. And when we got to know Omri and got to know the really good tahini that he was marketing and working with in Israel when we met him back in 2011, we realized that there was an opportunity to make tahini a more popular ingredient in the American market. But that entailed a lot of consumer education and time, really, to introduce a new product to the market. So we were inspired by this delicious, nutritious, and versatile ingredient, and also inspired by the opportunity in the fact that most people didn't know what it was. And that's really how we got started with Soom.
I actually don't know a lot about tahini. Like, I looked on your website and I was like, what do you pair it with? And what do you eat it with?
Exactly, and that's the question. I mean, most people, if they're familiar with tahini, are most familiar with it in its application in hummus. So do you like hummus?
Yes, love hummus.
Okay, and it's okay if you don't, but the secret to good hummus is actually good tahini. It's the high quality of the tahini, of the sesame seed, that can make a really creamy, fluffy hummus. Whereas a lot of people relate hummus exclusively to chickpeas, a good tahini is what sets it apart. But sesame seeds have a really unique, almost nutty flavor profile. I like to describe tahini as thicker than olive oil and thinner than peanut butter, but can be used for both in savory and sweet recipes. So you can use tahini like you would use oil or butter or peanut butter. And so if you imagine those in those types of recipes, whether it's a smoothie, a cookie, a soup, a salad dressing, those are the types of flavors or recipes that you can use tahini in. Anything, actually.
So also explain a little bit more about the mission that I also read in your website, which I love because you have these core values of like family, discovery, connectivity, transparency, and philanthropy. And I love that you have that because I think it's important for every business, big or small, to create products that speak to their own experiences and core beliefs. I think that sometimes there's a disconnect, especially in the more kind of corporate world, between core values and business strategies, but I don't think that has to be the case. So I just want to ask you a bit about what you think about that and how you came up with those values.
Those values are really how my sisters and I live our lives. It's what we expect from our employees. It's what we want our employees to expect from us. I mean, being a family founded by three sisters, we wanted our employees to respect the fact that we have this work-life balance that we're working on, right? My sisters and I are young. We have young kids. We would never want an employee being frustrated that we had to go home to take care of our kids because they had a doctor's appointment, or maybe just because it was a special day for the family. But of course, in order to get that respect, we have to extend that respect. So we want everybody in our company, but also within our network, in our community of Soom, to be able to live the type of life that my sisters and I want to live. I mean, the beautiful thing about selling tahini is that it's a really healthy product. I mean, I don't know if I would be able to have a business, for instance, selling potato chips or a really sugary candy, right? Because we are our own consumers. We want to be able to put things out into the world that we want to consume ourselves. And so it's always been a balance. I mean, the best thing about having a business is that you get to create that lifestyle choice. And I want Soom to be a place where I like working and where our employees like working. And in order to do that, these values have been really helpful. the most important thing to me about these values is it's actually helped us a lot more during times of crisis rather than times of just easygoing and growth. And so it's really been through COVID, or we had a big challenge a couple years ago in terms of a recall, where when you are asking yourself, what should I do? What should I tell somebody if it's a hard thing to share? When you can go back to our values and say, you know what, our value is transparency. We just have to tell the truth, right? There's nothing else that we can really do here. It's actually really helped us navigate more challenging times, even more so than just flirting us through, the good times.
So my second question, I guess, going more into the COVID-19 now reality, is how has COVID-19 affected you, and how has your personal business model / strategy evolved with social distancing?
It's a great question. So COVID impacted us in a pretty unique way. When Soom first started, our first 5 years, most of our revenue came from the restaurant industry. We would sell our tahini in large formats to restaurants all across the country. And it was at the end of 2018 that we actually set a more strategic intention to diversify our revenue, not so much coming from restaurants, but also from this consumer network that we had been building. So our consumer sales come from both retailers. We're distributed primarily between DC and New York. We're in about 450 stores, and we sell a lot online on Amazon and on our website. And so the good thing was that in 2019, we were diligently working on that consumer foundation. What happened when COVID hit was that immediately our restaurant supply chain was devastated. Distributors were canceling orders. Restaurants weren't ordering the way that they used to. In fact, it took like almost 8 weeks for restaurants to kind of breathe again. But at the same time, our consumer orders shot up. So I'm not sure what you've learned from other businesses during this time, but when people were at home and social distancing and not eating out, it meant they were cooking more at home. And so a lot of consumer packaged goods or CPG food brands or beverage brands actually did pretty well during this if they had a foundation in order to ship direct to consumer. So that was really instrumental for us, as one side of our business died ultimately, it still has life now, thank God, but another part of it shot up. And that's the real beauty in diversifying the type of revenue that you have. It really protects you for if one type of customer were to fall off, that you have other people there to buy the product. So we were okay. Social distancing, though, going back to these core values and our mission is we believe food brings people together. And so we were sitting here saying, how can we still connect with our consumers if we're not meeting them at these shows or marketing with them at these events that we normally meet them? And we really turned to, like a lot of other people, to this virtual programming. Not necessarily that we're producing a lot on our own, but in supporting other people that are producing content that has to do with food and making sure that if they're interested in tahini, that they have access to Soom and can ultimately become a partner of ours to share Soom with their extended communities. And so that's been a really great learning experience for me, in that so much of what I do normally is going to meet people in person, whether it's a chef or whether it's at a grocery store and a buyer or talking to a consumer. And it really made me proud to know that the brand and our values and the way that we like to communicate translated to this kind of new normal where people are communicating much more through computers and phones as opposed to in person.
I think that's really interesting, because you would think that it's harder to establish those relationships of, like, meeting other companies and networking, and it also seems a bit easier somehow for some people with COVID-19, but in some ways harder, so it's hard to kind of say.
Yeah, and that's just the reality of life, is it's not always so cookie cutter, right? Even though something seems easier, there are challenges that go along with it too. And the interesting thing when COVID hit was consumer expectation about content shifted dramatically. People were not looking for polished videos anymore, right? They were comfortable with somebody throwing their phone up in their kitchen, and maybe the lighting wasn't perfect, or maybe they didn't have the 5 angles that a Food Network show has to show what they're creating, but they just wanted to connect, you know what I mean? They just wanted to hear the voice or to experience something. And so that is what made it almost more accessible, is the expectation of how we're connecting or how it was produced or kind of, like edited so heavily before. that went out the window so quickly. It was really reassuring for me because I was always afraid to post, or I still am. I'm not very comfortable on social media, but I didn't feel comfortable posting a video of myself because I said, oh, it doesn't look as clean or it's not as well produced as another video out there. And that is kind of all out. The other thing is that I think this expectation of shifting to virtual is something that we've wanted for a long time. If I think about the expense of our needs for, let's say, doing a distributor meeting with a bunch of distributor reps in San Francisco, my national account manager has to fly to San Francisco, has to stay there for 2 or 3 nights, right? Needs to meet with everybody, is then traveling with these salespersons. And we've presented the idea of a virtual sales training, but they were never open to it because it wasn't how they did things before. Ultimately, COVID just kind of accelerated those needs of that virtual communication. So I'm hoping that through this, people are able to reestablish like what actually needs to be done in person and what, if it's better, can be done virtually. I think early on there was a funny meme, like now we know what meeting could have just been an email. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's just the truth. I mean, now we know what we need to do to connect, what really needs that connection, and what can be done a little bit more virtually or informally. But I miss the connection part. I mean, our office has just started to open up a little bit. And so it's a small team anyway, but people had been exclusively working from home for like 3 months. And I was just happy to have people in the office because the way that you can connect in person or through a conversation is so much more robust than through email. It's just kind of, in my opinion, not really comparable.
Right. I guess I would ask next, what do you feel currently is your greatest obstacle? Because it sounds like so many things are going well in this new age of COVID-19.
Going well, and so many things are going wrong.
Oh, no.
I mean, the fact that not wrong. It's just a challenge. The fact that now our consumer sales have increased and our distributor sales have decreased really shifts our needs in the warehouse. Whereas before we just had one warehouse employee, helping us to pack orders and occasionally keep Amazon in stock and things like that. Now we have him and 2 part-time warehouse employees to help us keep up because the volume is bigger when you sell to a consumer.
Right.
And so the reason why we stuck with restaurants for so long is because a restaurant could use a 40-pound bucket in a week, and a consumer might take 3 months or a year to go through an 11-ounce jar, right? And so the action that it took to kind of generate revenue in the restaurant industry was almost easier than in this consumer world, or it took less resources. And the main resources in business are just time and money. And now that we're selling more products to more people, that takes a lot more time and it costs more because time is money. So that's been, I think, our biggest shift is becoming more of a consumer-based business, which entails a lot of its own challenges and needs, versus more of a wholesale-based business, which is what we primarily did for a long time.
I think the phrase you just used, like the time is money phrase, applies, really well to how we're all going virtual and how you need to capture someone's attention within such a short span of time, right? Because otherwise, there are a million other sites they could go on. The whole world is at everyone's fingertips. So it's kind of like, how do you capture their attention with the small amount of time that you have? So I think that's really interesting.
It's one of the biggest challenges of having a business that is consumer-based, is for it to be a successful consumer-based business, you need a ton of consumers. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that is what's really challenging, whether it's a service-based business, whether it's an app, whether it's a product. When you want to sell to lots of individual consumers, you need to sell so much more in order to make enough money to cover all the expenses. So that's, just something to keep in mind through like an entrepreneurial journey, I think.
I guess that segues into how you think businesses should approach marketing strategies, which we kind of already touched on a little bit, but if you could just expand on that.
Marketing's tough. I mean, it's like this huge realm of opportunity and you don't know what works. And I think the thing that's really empowered me and my team is just to not be afraid to fail. Like, you've got to try things. You have to give them their time to see if they work. And then you need to evaluate it and make a decision based off of the data. I mean, we can be paralyzed, and I have been before, by wondering if this decision is the right decision. And you just don't know until you try it. I mean, whether it's a packaging decision or an ad or something like that. And of course, you don't want to go in blind to something that costs tens of thousands of dollars. But if it's a couple $100 here, like $100 there, testing an ad, that's something that I think people need to be willing to experiment with and kind of give it its time, and be willing to learn from your mistakes from. The other thing about marketing is, in my opinion, it's a crowded space. Like I don't think Soom would benefit from creating our own podcast, right? I don't think that Soom would benefit from creating our own YouTube channel. I mean, we put up videos rarely, but so it's not anything. But we could benefit from other people that are already doing that successfully. And that's been a part of our strategy the whole time, is finding the right partners that have more influence than you or already have a network of people, and using them to amplify your voice, I think, is something that can save people a lot of time, or stress in creating like their own unique content always.
I think just strategizing is important because, like you said, if you just do everything yourself and you're of the mindset that, oh, I need to do, marketing myself, I need to do all of these other things myself, okay, great, maybe you do that, but it's also like you could get in touch with other people who could help you with that, who are already established. So I think, that's really interesting.
And that's a philosophy that we have in business in general, is you can do something yourself until you're not doing it well enough. Right. And something that you do better is faltering because you're focusing on something that you don't do well. That's when you need to decide, to your point, to either find a partner or somebody else, like an influencer, or hire, right? Or bring somebody else into the organization. The second that I was losing, for instance, when Soom was really small and I was doing everything, when I was spending my time in the warehouse packing orders instead of going out and selling, that's when we realized, oh, we need help in the warehouse, right? That's not the best use of my time and not the best use of the company's resources. And so I think keeping that in mind across marketing, across sales, across logistics, across every department, we can all do everything for as long as possible until things are failing around us. And that's when you need to strategize about how to accomplish everything with hopefully the help of other people.
What advice do you have for anyone who wants to start a business?
The main advice that I share with people is to share your idea. And I think that comes across as really scary. Like, what if somebody steals it? But the reality is like, unless you're Mark Zuckerberg and you create Facebook, none of us are creating anything so original here. You know what I mean? Like, not in a bad way, just in a matter of fact way. But if you keep it too close to the chest or too quiet, you're never going to know who's going to be able to help you or introduce you to the right person or be able to clarify something for you. So I'm always really active about sharing what we're working on. Or early on in Soom, I told everybody about this idea. Of course, somebody else could have gone out to start their own tahini company, but good for them, and I wish them luck. It's really hard to start a company. You know what I mean? It's why most people are not entrepreneurs and why most companies fail, within the first year or two. And so I think that being confident to share what you're working on, it will only lead to beneficial conversations, because somebody may be able to offer you advice. Somebody might be able to introduce you to somebody else, and say yes to any meeting, and always follow up, if it's possible, with a handwritten thank you note. It's something that I've done throughout and did a lot early on, but after a very important meeting that I knew somebody like really extended their time to me, I would follow up with a handwritten thank you note. It's a philosophy that our father, who's a businessman as well, like shared with us throughout high school and middle school. And it's just a really valuable touch, because people don't write letters anymore. It's just a small something you can do. It takes 5 minutes that makes a really big impact on somebody's perception of you.
Wow, I love that. Your father seems really wise. Like
he is really wise. We're really lucky because both of our parents are entrepreneurs. So I think it just kind of, was ingrained in us. But B, they've offered a lot of advice, and just watching them by example has been really helpful through this entrepreneurial journey for me and my sisters.
I think so many startups have the mentality of, oh, you need to kind of guard secrets so much, because it's like we don't want somebody else to steal our idea, that kind of eclipses the vision of the company. So I think it's important that, like you said, you not be afraid to share your ideas and take risks, because there may be another company, but maybe they don't do it as well as you do, right? So you have to keep that in mind.
Exactly. And they probably won't do it as well as you. And to be honest, if you're the right person for entrepreneurship, they probably don't have the same constitution that you do. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurship is just a grind. It takes a really special person to be able to get up every day with just fires all around them and problems everywhere, and be the one responsible for solving that. And so I think you're much less likely to like share an idea with somebody that might steal it than you might realize. Now, if you're in business school, I get it. Like, I get why people are super competitive there and don't share their ideas.
Yeah.
I've heard horror stories of people stealing them. But out in the real world, it just doesn't seem that likely for me.
So my next question would be kind of a future question I'm asking to everyone I'm interviewing. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Where do you hope to take this business?
Man, my team's been staring at me like this for like 3 months. Like, what is even our 1-year plan? What's our 2-year plan? 10 years is kind of tough. But now that our consumer growth has really started to take shape, to be honest, COVID is what accelerated that. We really want to invest into consumer products. So talking about all the challenges and all the resources that it takes to be a consumer-based business, we're kind of ready to tackle that now that we have these 7 years of business under our belt. So we're working on an extension of our product line. So right now we have one flavor of tahini. It's a chocolate sweet tahini spread. It's like our version of Nutella, but it has less than half the amount of sugar and only 3 ingredients, and it's vegan and lots of differences. And we'd like to expand that line of sweet spreads to keep innovating the nut butter category. One of the things we've realized is that there's not a lot of sesame as the soul of nut butters. If you look at it, it's almond butter, cashew butter. Right. I mean, now there's even watermelon seed butter. There are lots of butters out there, peanut butter, of course, but not a lot that has sesame as its soul. And we just believe so strongly in sesame, its health benefits and versatility. So I'd really like to see Soom grow into more of a CPG, or like I said, consumer packaged goods food brand, with more SKUs, more products that we offer, and selling those both online and in retailers across the country.
So.
And if I can just circle back, it's so funny when I say that out loud, because that was our idea when we started Soom. But retail was so hard and so expensive, and the restaurant industry was really kind of helping us rise, that's why we kind of like let that go. And now that it's come back to us in the right time, we're like really ready to capitalize on it and really ready to work through that. So also trust that when you have an idea, it's not going to be linear. Like, it doesn't just grow in a straight line, right? It's going to be like this, and you're going to be like way down in the dumps some days and be like, why do I even have a business? And can't somebody else just pay me to work? And
can't somebody take it over? Why?
Yeah. Some days you're going to be the happiest person in the world, or some days you're going to take a vacation day because you're your own boss, and that's like beautiful. But it's just ironic now that we're back to that after 7 years. And we kind of released that goal like a year and a half or 2 years into the business. So we've come full circle in the last 5 years, which is exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time.
So we're coming to the end of our interview. So I wanted to ask, what can we do to support you? If you want to shout out a website or just a social media account where viewers could learn more about your business.
Yeah, please. Our website is Soom, S as in Sam, OOM, Foods, plural.com. After you create a business and you find out that it's very hard to hear, you learn to spell it very clearly. And our social handles are also Soom Foods. And definitely follow us on Instagram. We just post the most beautiful food photography, great recipes, healthy recipes. And if you're just interested in trying tahini, actually in the box that you're producing, we're going to be sharing these 1 ounce or 2 tablespoon squeeze packs. So people can try this, maybe drizzle it on their yogurt, or put it into your immersion blender with chickpeas and a little bit of lemon juice and garlic, and make your own hummus. So we're just really excited for people to feel confident to bring tahini into their homes, and also to utilize it more in their cooking.
I'm so excited to try some. I'm going to be in my kitchen just trying tahini all day.
I can't wait.
Excited. So I would just like to thank you again so much for agreeing to do this interview. I know there was like a scheduling thing and then technology thing, so I just wanted to thank you so much for being willing to help me and share, some things about your business and your journey, which I really appreciate.
You're more than welcome. I'm really excited to see where you go through this process as well. So thanks for asking me.